Okay, here we are. Alt.nerd.obsessive. Worst episode ever.
Hey everybody, welcome to Worst Episode Ever, a podcast for people who love The Simpsons, by people who love The Simpsons, about how much we hate The Simpsons. We're here trying to find which is the worst episode ever. And my name is Dan.
My name is Jack.
And we're back for another week. It is, what day is it? It's July
Sunday.
something or other.
Oh,
well, it's Sunday when we're recording. It's Thursday when you're listening to it, if you're listening to the day it came out. And it's probably the 30th.
Yeah, unless
last
you
one in
could
July.
be listening to this theoretically in some kind of post-apocalyptic future where
that's true.
the days are no longer named after Roman gods, but I don't know, maybe they're named after us. Maybe it's Jack's Day.
They're named after presidents. It's Trump Day.
That's not funny.
No, it's not. So here we are. We are going to be watching an episode.
It's kind of funny. I'm sorry.
It is. Thank you. I appreciate. Kind of funny is all I ever hope to be.
That was really rude of me. I don't approve of that. No.
You're not funny. Get out of my house, which is also We Studios.
Is that, have we boiled down to you doing an impression of me now?
Yeah.
From my parents to me?
We're getting there.
Am I one of the bus stop characters now?
You are. Get out there.
I'm like in the Phantom Zone. No.
So anyway, we are here. We're going to be taking a break in a moment to watch an episode of The Simpsons, and we're going to be watching an episode from season 22. It is called The Scorpion's Tale. Originally aired March 2011. Jack, have you seen this one?
I haven't. Is it the tail like the story or like the actual pointy tail of the scorpion?
It's the tale like the story.
T-A-L-E.
And I'm hoping that at some point they do the tale of the scorpion and the frog that's in like every movie ever. Like Drive was in Drive.
I don't.
Oh, or it's like the scorpion's on the frog's back. They have to. This is not interesting.
I remember the scorpion on Ryan Gosling's back.
Right. Well, that was symbolism of this story where the scorpion stings the frog because he's a douchebag, and they both die. And the frog is like, "Why did you sting me?" And the scorpion's like, "That's just how I am."
Oh, I like that. Is it an Aesop? No, that doesn't.
Maybe.
That's a little dark.
I think it was a fractured fairy tale, actually. No, I have no idea.
Scary stories to tell in the dark.
Yes, the classic books that scared the shit out of me when I was a kid because those drawings were terrible and frightening. Amazon, that's a thing. Click through Amazon if you like the show, wepodcast.com. We appreciate that. A lot of you guys have been real good about the Amazon click-throughs. That help keeps the podcast free, and we like it if you do that. So you just go to our website, wepodcast.com, click the Amazon banners, and just shop like you normally would, and that helps us a great deal. Anyway, we are going to be watching Scorpion's Tale. Literally all we know about is that Werner Herzog is on it, so maybe
awesome.
A little ghost girl who sounds a little bit like him, she might pop up in this episode. So keep an eye out for that, or an ear out since you're listening. And this is not our best intro, so we're going to take a break. We have a guest joining us. We'll introduce him in a moment, but for now, we're taking that break.
I'm sorry I was so stubborn. I hope you're not mad.
Oh, I ain't mad, and I never will be again, thanks to your wonderful... Ah! Let me finish! Thanks to your wonderful drug.
So, that was the Scorpion's Tale.
It sure was, Jack.
And before we get into that tale, I'd like to tell you a tale of the guest we have today.
What a tale it is.
And today we have with us Harry Nelson. How's it going, Harry?
Great. Hi. Well, thanks for having me here,
Of course,
guys.
You're very welcome.
We're paying back the favor, really, because the first time we were ever on somebody else's podcast was when we were on yours.
Yeah.
HarrySaysYes.com.
Yeah, check it out, everybody.
I thought it was .org, but I guess it's .com.
.edu.
We're gathering a group, and then we'll become an org.
Yeah, so we were on an episode of Harry's podcast a few months back, like November, December? I think
No,
in
it
April.
was this year.
No.
November,
No,
we were
You're
just
right, we
starting.
just started
Nobody
the
would
show.
want us
Never
on there.
mind.
We really like that 2 episodes of the podcast we do. As long as you don't do any silly voices or break out, or your show doubles in length.
Surely we won't do any of that stuff. But no, we were on Harry's podcast. Harry Says Yes, back in April, I guess. And it was a great time. It's a good podcast. You should listen to that episode. If you haven't, you should listen to every episode if you like that one.
Yeah,
or,
totally.
You know, even if you don't like it, just listen to every
Is it like
episode.
Serial? Do we have to start from episode 1?
Yeah, there's a really big murder plot that you guys from the very beginning. But it's
Man.
good stuff. Yeah, listen to their episode. Pause this podcast right now. Listen to their entire episode, and then of course come back and
Yeah,
listen to
that'll give you the context you need for this episode.
Yeah.
Because we might do callbacks to it, like, oh, you remember that Kava voice I did, right?
Yeah, what?
Hey guys.
We should do like a choose your own adventure with a network of podcasts. So if you want
Yeah.
to see Dan do another Dalek voice, check out this podcast. Go to page 32.
You are listening to the Dalek Report.
That's very complicated, and nobody would follow. Nobody would keep up.
We'll try.
So, Harry, you have a podcast, and you are a person and an individual, but we don't really care
all
about
true,
any of that. We just want to know what's your take on The Simpsons. So, obviously, you've watched it before.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
still watch it?
I don't watch it like week to week anymore. I stopped doing that a while back. I grew up watching. They used to be on twice at 6 and 6:30 every day after school, and I would just watch. That's how I caught up, and then I caught up maybe around season 9 or 10.
You being caught up, so you weren't watching it from the very beginning.
No, I was just a little boy.
What would you consider now, in retrospect, your favorite seasons?
I feel like my gauge for like good Simpsons episodes is a little like goes a little later than you guys. Like I can accept them into like maybe season 12 or so. Like season 12, like there are some 13 episodes I even enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are good. Season 12 has some good episodes. I think 11 was really hit or miss. 12 is some good stuff, though. 12 has the, I think it's 12 that has the one with Stan Lee. I like that episode.
I like this.
I like the Stan Lee parts, I guess, actually.
Yeah, even in today's episodes, there's jokes that I find
Yeah,
funny.
that's true.
I can't think of any solid episodes. There's a few in season 9 that I would say are as good as season 8, but we know that because I've been on the show for the past 42 episodes.
Oh, you're that Jack.
I'm that
Oh,
Jack. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Dan has face blindness. If it is,
I have no idea who I'm looking at right now.
he just assumes that when he comes to Wii Studios, I'm the co-host
Yeah.
for the day. That's why he's not. That's actually a question at the top of every show when he goes. Yeah, he goes, I'm Dan, and
Yeah, I really need you to say your name because I don't know who I'm speaking with whom I am speaking.
In all seriousness, face blindness is an unfortunate condition, and our hearts go out to anybody else.
Look out for it.
I know we're doing crazy fun times, but I think I might have a very mild face blindness because a lot of times I like don't recognize people where I know them from, or I'm like, do I know that guy?
I don't know if that's the same.
I think it's just being a jerk.
But
Never mind. I just don't know people's names.
I never heard of face blindness until about 5 years ago.
Yeah,
and then I feel
think I
like
heard of it on Arrested
Oliver
Development.
Sacks was showing up everywhere and talking about it.
Right.
But since then I've met a decent amount of people that have it. They get by. It's just they really don't like I constantly either grow a beard in a week or shave my head or something, and my friends with face blindness really don't like that because they really I come into a room and I'm just like, hey, and they're just like, hi.
When you opened the door to Wii Studios, I was like, wait, am I in the right place? Because you look different than you looked last time I saw you.
Yeah. Well, the week we did your podcast in April was an unfortunate week where I was trying like the Johnny Depp goatee.
Oh yeah.
And well, actually, I wasn't. That's right. I hated it immediately, and I wanted to shave it. But then a friend of the show, Nick Noga, wanted me to keep it so I could play a cop in something he was doing.
Oh yeah, I remember
So I was
that.
like, I really don't want to walk around like this. I feel like no offense to people. Maybe you pull it off to Johnny Depp if you're listening, or anybody else that has
Johnny Depp
has
is
the mustache
definitely listening.
goatee. But anyway, I hated it.
It mostly makes you look like the
And
devil.
then we never shot the thing, and I knew we weren't going to, so I shaved it like the next day, and then I was just like, man, because you take pictures of all your guests,
Oh, yeah.
and so now everybody's going to be like, oh, let me check
Yeah.
out, who's this guest, this Simpsons host here? What's that lip chin hair combination?
What's that caterpillar on his face?
Anyway,
We will talk about The Simpsons at some point.
Yeah.
so all right, so you're okay with later
I think
episodes?
part of it
and-
comes like I was watching them all at the same time. Like the syndication, they would just kind of show them randomly, so like
Yeah.
they were just mixed in with the good episodes. So it all feels like nostalgia. to
It's
me.
all just like there for you. you
yeah,
know?
it's like I remember liking it when I was a kid, so I like still. But at a certain point, there was a clear drop off. And
And we're going to talk about that clear drop off right now.
Oh, okay.
So let's talk about this week's episode. This week's episode was from season 22, which was
yes.
what, 3-4 years
It
ago?
was 2011, so this is pretty recent.
Okay. So real quick, we'll do a plot recap. It starts with a field trip in the desert.
I'd love to hear your plot recap here. I'm very interested how you're going to spin this into a coherent
I
plot.
wish we had that clock game, Price is Right timer. Anyway, so
Da, 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 da.
that's not it.
It is Price is Right song.
So it starts off with a field trip. The kids are in the desert. Lisa notices that scorpions are placated when they're near a certain flower, and she creates a antidote to aggression using this flour.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Grandpa is kicked out of the retirement castle and moves in and is bothering everybody because he's Grandpa. So Homer starts using this placating flour potion to keep Grandpa happy. It works. That gets the attention of a pharmaceutical giant led by Werner Herzog, played by Werner Herzog. And so then they create I guess the plan is to mass market the pill, but because of drug testing, and they're really only supposed to give it to Grandpa, but then everybody gets it anyway through Bart. And it turns out there's a huge side effect where your eyes pop out. Over lubrication is the pseudoscience they use to ground that. I think that's something that would be like in the Marvel movies. It's like, the over eye lubricant. That's why that's happening.
That's how you become Ant-Man. I'm Michael Douglas.
And then, but everybody wants to keep it. They don't mind that their eyes are popping out because it's nice to be happy.
Right.
And then it ends, right? Well, how's it end?
There's like a generation gap fight, and then it's not. And then
So
it
they
just
don't
ends.
take the pills anymore? Or
They do. We'll get there. You did a good job with the broad strokes here.
So this episode opens. They drive to the desert. It's very hot.
It's a lot like Wii Studios right now, which is sweltering.
The ventilation. When we decided to go with a solid gold studio,
Yes.
we probably should have put a little bit more thought.
Yeah,
Probably.
It's beautiful though.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Harry.
I'm sorry you had to wear the sunglasses because of the amazing glare.
The luminance of our gold.
Also, if
Click
little,
through on Amazon, please.
if little ghost girl shows up, remember to close your eyes.
I'm radiant. I was partial to the Werner Herzog parts of this episode.
Guys, I'm
I'll come
scared.
back later. I don't mean to haunt you.
Okay, so anything you guys have to say about the first couple of?
Yeah, I mean, there was a line that Ralph Wiggum had. I wet my arm pants because he was sweating so much. What'd you think of that?
That's fine.
That's a Ralph line.
It was a Ralph line. And I also did like that they called the park Satan's Anvil, and Skinner is like, but no one knows why. And then like they pan in the background, there is like a huge rock sculpture of Satan hammering an anvil, like the rocks have made that formation. I thought that was funny because it looked very evil and
Yeah, I like that. That
was a great
reminds me
visual.
That Otto, at the very top, says, "Oh man, this looks like this was one of the planets in Star Trek."
Yeah.
That bothered me because it was a lot of the planets and a lot of the Star Treks. It
Yes.
wasn't just one.
Yeah.
But it was a funny connection. It was an easy description to make.
yeah.
They had the whole thing with the people who are afraid of the government.
Yeah, well, before we get there, I definitely want to talk about that. But there was one
Fuck
line
up,
that
Harry.
Sorry,
that I did.
I'll just shut the. I'll just.
We got this, all right? We'll get us some water.
Could you please get us some water for me? It's very hot. No, I'm just kidding. Before that, there was the bit where Bart is behind a rock with a rattle, and he rattles it, and Skinner's like, oh no, a rattlesnake. And they're like, you fall for that every year. And I like that Skinner said, yeah, but then the one year I didn't. I got bitten by an actual rattlesnake.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny, but then it went on, and it
Yeah,
was
then
like,
Chalmers
then you
was
used a
like,
sick
yeah,
day, and
yeah.
you didn't have it. And it's like, I don't care about this. It's just, you made the joke.
Extra beat alarm.
Extra beats.
Rib shot, double symbol. The Skinner being bit by an actual snake, that's great.
Yeah.
Classic Skinner. But
Very funny.
you're right, it went on a little too long.
Yeah.
Much like this intro.
Yes. Is this still the intro? All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to watch this episode. No, but now, Harry, yes, the desert people.
Yeah, they were desert people. They were.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, they were afraid of the government. At one point, they were like, "Well, black helicopters are going to show up."
Yeah, so it was like Martin sets foot on their property, and then they're like, oh, this is how it starts. Like one person,
Yeah,
and then...
they're classic, like, off-the-grid, anti-government,
Yeah.
rural, right-wing folk.
And then, like, that is what happens. A bunch of black helicopters come in, and they're like, we just have a National Endowment of the Arts grant that we're going to give you for your sculptures. And the guy's like, no way. And he just starts shooting, and there's, like, a shootout. This takes, like, a good minute of the episode. It was not good.
It was really
just,
Yeah,
like, out there. And I wrote, is this the plot? Because I didn't know what this episode was about.
Yeah.
It's clearly, not clearly, but I'm going out on a limb and making a safe assumption that this is just liberal Simpsons writers like taking pot shots at a political people,
Like
group of
libertarians
people,
who are, like, living in the desert
a
off the
group
grid.
of people that they disagree with politically, and B, are easy to mock because they're kind of over the top with their lifestyle choices.
guess, yeah.
So, they're kind of just taking pot shots at it, which, the Simpsons writers have been doing even in the classic thing. The difference is usually it's just a quick line here, very subtle there,
Yeah.
blink if you miss it, or, it's only for people who you'd have to know to look for it to really appreciate it. You know?
Right.
The fact that they spent, was gag after gag after gag, it's right, it's
so
its own
much.
scene.
Yeah.
It was not worth it, especially because it wasn't very funny.
Disconnected from anything else. Like it wasn't even a Simpsons character who triggered this. It was just Martin happened to walk onto these people's property. It had nothing to do with the Simpsons.
And that's what, like, if you're gonna go out of your way to do some kind of political thing like that, then it's the worst way to do it is to really make it loud and obvious
call a lot of attention to it.
Exactly. That was not good.
Yeah. Then they kind of did a similar thing with these rock climbers in the next scene, where they said, like, I forget what the intro to it was. It was like, everything's endangered here except the rock climbers, and there's just a bunch of rock climbers climbing some kind of structure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're jabbing at making a jab at rock climbers as a culture because they kind of are a little like that, little.
They all cling together and
no, I
end
mean,
up
like,
climbing park rangers
with not just rock climbers, with a lot of niche things that people like to do. They like to talk about it all the time and show off and kind of are douchey about it. And,
like me with my podcast.
So I mean, that seems like an interesting group of people that you don't usually see being made fun of. So I can see them doing that.
Yeah,
and then they do a very funny visual gag that I actually really liked, where the man,
You go for it. I shouldn't talk.
Well, there's this bit where the rock climbers, one of them just starts climbing a park ranger. It sounds like you guys both liked it. I actually didn't love that so much. Where he's like, I've climbed park rangers on one of every continent. I just need to get to the summit.
That part.
Oh, the idea of it I thought was funny. They like hammered it in, and then I liked at the end when he's like pretending that. Not pretending, I guess. He's like, I'm stuck. I can't get down. I like broke my toe or whatever. And then the ranger himself that he's climbed up on is like, all right, now I gotta come up. And the ranger starts climbing himself.
Yeah, I think that's what me and Harry talking about.
Okay, that part I did like.
The idea of them climbing park rangers was stupid because it doesn't make any sense and it's not grounded in any sort of reality.
Right.
Whereas, although the guy climbing himself is also not grounded in reality, I guess it's grounded in the rules they already just set forth with the.
Right. It's just.
But the visual of him just putting his hand on his mouth and. That was very funny to just see the guy climb himself.
Yeah.
And the personality that they chose to give the guy, one of like a random Hank Azaria personalities that they give to like these minor characters, was kind of the perfect choice for this man to climb himself. It
was good.
This understated macho.
Then there's a scene where Bart is climbing into a mine shaft, and it's a gold mine, and he comes back out, and they're like, Milhouse and Nelson are there, and they're like, did you find any gold? And he's like, no, something better. I found, like, saucy French postcards. Mm-hmm. And he opens them up, and they're, like, from the 1800s, and it's, like, French women in, like, the big underwear that they used to have, like, full body, basically.
Ooh la la!
Yeah, so they got, old French postcards, and Bart's looking at them. And I liked, he goes, whoa, mama, which was like one of his way back like catchphrases, like season 1. Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting. We haven't heard that in a while. And then there was something that was much less interesting, which I'm sure you guys disliked as much as I did. Yeah. I'll let Harry talk about it.
Well, I like that Nelson
Thanks,
was
Harry. So...
HarrySaysThis.com. Nelson, I like that Nelson was like, this is fool's porn. I thought that was kind of a fun line.
Fool's porn was kind of funny, yeah.
But then he goes behind...
I just got that, like fool's gold.
Like fool's gold, yeah.
Then he goes behind a cactus and...
Yeah.
He masturbates.
He's jerking off behind a cactus, basically, because he takes all the postcards with him, and he starts throwing them out one by one. You don't see Nelson, you just see the cactus that he's behind, and then he throws out the last one, and then he just goes, and regret.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Now, that's
dark.
That's a funny line in itself, like the idea of that as soon as you climax, you're full of regret.
Right.
It does not belong in The Simpsons.
No, it doesn't belong with an episode of Louie or something.
Yeah. And then, I knew they were kind of going with the masturbation joke when the pictures are flying and you hear me, but I was kind of okay with it. I didn't think it was funny, but it's that classic, like, where, you just hear somebody kind of escalating. It's like, oh yeah. For some reason, when you realize he actually ejaculated, that's when I was just like, ugh.
Because you're thinking about it. You're like, so Nelson just came on a cactus.
It goes from innuendo to like reality. I guess that was the problem. Also, next to a cactus, I don't know about you, but I don't want needles going into my pee. I guess I'll just say it out loud.
Difference of opinion, okay?
Yeah, man. You don't knock until you try it because it's like acupuncture.
I mean, I guess you could break off a branch and use the aloe for lube. This is Desert Masturbation 101. If you're just tuning in,
Is that one of your other dozen podcasts?
it's my Simpsons Desert Masturbation podcast that I do.
Let's talk about this one scene and possibly one other desert masturbation scene we've yet to watch.
Don't finger yourself with cacti, ladies.
Ladies.
Good life advice. Thanks, Jack. So we did not like that. There were a couple of other things in the desert. I like it cut to a mirage thing, and it said there was a sign that says mirage ahead, and then the mirage vanished, and then the mirage ahead sign vanished. I thought that was cute.
Yeah, and that whole sequence I really liked, where they actually took their time to show how pretty the desert is.
Yes, same thing. I thought it was very well animated. It looked really nice.
I think we've mentioned on the show before, but I've basically never left New York in my life. I've kind of just never left within like 5 square miles of where I grew up, pretty much ever. One of the few exceptions was when I did drive across the country, and I kind of blew it. I did it in like 5 days, and I was more about just getting home and instead of sitting and enjoying it. But anyway, point being, the American Southwest was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. It was like, it was really like where I was just like, this is incredible, this is beautiful, like, you know, the earth is amazing. So I really was like just into showing them taking their time to show like, look how awesome the desert is, and through Lisa's perspective, which makes sense because she would be the one to most appreciate it.
Sure.
The music was very upbeat and like, isn't nature great? But it also really sounded pretty much exactly like the True Romance theme song from the early 90s movie. I don't know if you guys are familiar. But it's a very famous musical score in that they've used it in a lot of other like trailers and everything since. And it's very chimey, like a xylophone, and it's very upbeat and happy. Interestingly enough, it was written by Hans Zimmer.
Yes.
Who I guess was his pre-Boim phase. It's like it's like do 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 do. Wow.
So the song is actually called Gassenhauer. It's a piece from Carl Orff. Wikipedia
the
coming
one
in
in
handy.
Simpsons, not the Zimmer.
The one, well, it's okay. So it's Hans Zimmer based the score from True Romance, that specific song you're talking about, off of that piece of music, and the same music that was used in this episode has also been in Badlands, the what's his face movie? Terrence Malick. He's the one, and also
another desert
Finding
movie, right?
Forrester.
Huh.
And
Anyway, it's always been one of my favorite beats. The one
Michael
problem in True
Moore's
Romance is you're like,
Capitalism,
wow, this
a
is
love
a
story.
really great song. This is in True Romance, it's like, this is really great music, but
Yeah.
it's pretty much like an 18-second track that they just play on loop, and it gets really old really quick.
Yeah.
Zimmer maybe should have added a few bombs. I don't know.
loves his bombs.
But yeah, so that fit the scene, the desert scene perfect. I really like that sequence.
Yeah, I did too. Harry, what'd you think of that sequence?
Good stuff.
There you go. Harry says, good stuff.
So
Check it out.
So she sees the title scorpions fighting.
Titular scorpions,
Titular
yes.
scorpions.
Now we're getting into the plot, such as it is.
And she realizes, she makes an incredible leap of logic, because as soon as they calm down, she realizes, oh, it must be this one variable that's right next to me, these flowers. Yeah. So we leave the desert, and we cut to Grandpa. He's being evicted from the retirement castle for a seemingly random...
There was never a reason given, right?
They said he was too cranky.
Yeah. Oh, is that what it was? Yeah. Okay, then that kind of makes sense.
It makes sense for the story, but I'm assuming he was as cranky as always, and
right.
It's just like, all right. Anyway, so he gets kicked out by these two big orderlies. What was the fish tank line?
Oh, he says, Grandpa's saying something about how he watches TV, but they only get one channel. And he's like, that's a fish tank. And Grandpa says, you're a fish tank. And he says, I wish I was a fish tank, because then I can filter out these harsh words.
Yeah.
That was a good line. I like that
a lot.
All right, so there were several moments in this episode, watching this episode, that made me think about the means justifying the end when it comes to telling a joke.
Okay.
It always reminded me of in religion class.
We went to Catholic school. We had religion class,
which was also a borderline like philosophy class, at least junior year. And I remember they taught us that the Catholic doctrine is the means do not justify the end.
Really? I don't remember that.
Yeah, well, I don't think you had Father Medulla. You were in the special advanced Catholic class because you were teaching other students.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't allowed because I'm not actually Catholic.
Yes. This is far more information than anyone needs.
So we were taught the means do not justify the end, in that for example, you can't murder somebody to save somebody else. Basically, it's really usually it's more complicated than that. and like self-defense doesn't count. But it's a modern 21st century take on Catholicism, like post-Vatican II, where they're trying to give you all these rules and exceptions to rules so that you can actually live a modern life and still be Catholic. But the first time I noticed was the couch gag. So do the means justify the end? We really liked when it said game over.
Right.
Now that game over really wouldn't work unless the gag was too long as it is, because the joke being you went through all this
the abruptness
setup.
of the game over is proportional to the length of the setup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So is it worth sitting through a pretty lame, like, all right, let's get this over with, to have a funny punchline that you genuinely like? It's a tough call.
That's a tough call, yeah. And I feel like more often than not, they do a lot of those kinds of jokes where it's long setup, quick payoff.
And
we usually like the payoff.
That's why I wanted to bring this up, because I've been noticing it a lot in these post-classic episodes that we cover, where I really do like the punchline, usually because it is quick and snappy, but it wouldn't have worked if you had taken it out of context and given up the lengthy, usually cringeworthy setup that we don't like.
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about here is the whole time with Grandpa and the orderly. Grandpa says, "You're a fish tank," and then the big orderly starts crying, and I'm just like, "Really, you're a fish tank? That's the line you're putting in there? Like, no, I'm not. You are."
Yeah.
Like, that's really weak writing. And then the big orderly is actually a big baby and he's crying. It's like, yeah, we've seen this before. I was really just not having it. But the line, like, "I wish I was a fish tank to filter out these feelings," is a really funny, smart line. So
I think it was worth it there.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Did the means justify the end?
I think in that instance, yes, it did.
All right, so just something I think we should keep an eye out for, with because I feel like we've seen it dozens of times at this point on this podcast, and it's a really interesting question, because how many shitty jokes do you want to put up with, or shitty setups for, like, when is the punchline not worth it?
Yeah. When will it be enough, Simpsons writers?
Let it go, guys. I think it's interesting. The episodes have gotten shorter as like the years have gone on because they've added more, but they feel so much longer than the old ones.
They really feel a lot longer. I think it's because, like, we'll talk a little bit more about this later when the plot really starts to go crazy, but this episode has no real straightforward plot, especially at the end when all of a sudden it's just like, your generation sucks and our generation's great. Like, that was not in the episode at all until the very end.
Yeah, I like the 3-act structure.
Just really makes it feel
not
long.
like everything has to be the 3-act structure for me to enjoy it, but it does give you some kind of, at least for somebody like me who sees the matrix behind how a script is written, and I know I'm in the 2nd act, which is maybe something my mom and my sister wouldn't be saying to themselves, but it's funny how a lot of these episodes we cover on the show where I'm just like, are we in the middle? Are we in the end? Where are we in the story? Because there was a point where we'll get to it where there's a weird tangent with Homer and Lenny and Carl in the car, and I was like, is this the end?
Yeah.
And then
that's the end of the generation
and then
thing.
when you start, and this happens to me in movies too, when I go to the movies and I think I'm seeing the end, I've kind of, it's not, by no fault of the filmmakers, maybe, unless maybe it was a structural flaw, because I think the movie's over, but it's not, and now the rest of the movie I'm antsy because I'm waiting for the movie to end, because now I'm like, oh man, I thought the movie ended, and it might have only been 45 minutes into the movie, but for whatever reason I convinced myself.
You're like, okay, story arc complete.
Yeah, and then it just mentally it just makes it drag.
Sure.
So,
like Lord of the Rings, like the last one, where it ended, but then there was 45 more minutes of other endings.
Yeah.
So Grandpa has to live with the Simpsons. I don't have much to say about this, but I really did like, he's going to stay in each person's room. They're going to, like, trade off, and the wipe between all of it was Grandpa's really grumpy face, like a Batman kind of thing, like swiping through the screen. I like that a lot.
The first time when he was staying with Bart, and I thought that was going to be the plot, I was like, they did this already. The fighting hellfish.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that they they played with it. Like, what if he's in Lisa's room? What if he's in? Yeah. I don't know. I didn't find it particularly funny.
It was whatever. Laughing. I especially didn't like when he was in Homer and Marge's room.
Oh yeah, that was strange.
Yeah, he was just
having sex.
He was just watching them have sex, and he was like, "That's not how you have sex," or whatever he said.
He said in my day, women didn't make noise or something like that.
That was kind of funny, actually. But the idea of Grandpa being in the room while Homer and Marge are having sex is just, like, terrible to me.
Yeah, maybe I'm desensitized to all the awful things that, like, even just in this episode alone, a 10-year-old boy masturbating behind a cactus. But if I'd a nickel. But
is that the title of the episode, guys?
Could be.
Just them having sex in the bed. I was like, I knew it was like, oh, this shouldn't be here. But at this point, viscerally, I'm not bothered by it anymore. At least something as mild as that. Oh yeah, Homer's. So they're all fighting over who has to have him in the room, and Homer pretends to be Maggie to get it. I just wanted to point out that Homer's Maggie's voice was basically itchy, scratchy.
It was one of them, whichever one Dan Castellaneta does. I think Itchy.
It was a weird choice for Dan Castellaneta to make, because I don't think he's ever done an impression of Maggie before. 'Cause
Yeah, I
she
don't think
doesn't
so,
talk.
because she's a baby.
He's done Marge, and and other.
He's done Marge.
And
And
Grandpa
Grandpa
was in the room. Synergy. Yeah, so I just want to note that it was a weird choice for her voice.
This is something that I've brought up a number of times on the podcast, but in this episode there is a fully rendered and animated Mrs. Butterworth bottle.
Batterworth.
Oh, was it Batterworth?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, I thought it was actual Mrs.
I
Butterworth.
think it said Mrs. Batterworth.
If it was Mrs. Batterworth and it's like kind of a joke, then never mind. I was gonna say it's.
Were you bringing up your
it's
conspiracy
product
theory?
placement.
Of
Yeah,
product
I
placement?
think there's a big conspiracy.
What was the name of the Mrs. Butterworth in the Apu episode where
where Barney
Monster Mart and
I don't
Barney
think it had a
Axelrod-
name. I think it was just
Alright.
supposed to be Mrs. Butterworth, but without a name.
If it had said butter instead of batter, I really don't think I would have a problem with it, and I'm pretty sure the Mrs. Butterworth people are sneaking.
I think they are.
Tax-free
Look.
bribes to Al Jean.
All I'm saying is, after we're done recording this podcast, I'm going out and buying a bunch of syrup, and it's damn well going to be Mrs. Butterworth, and it
Those
wasn't going to be
pancakes
that
there
before.
did look pretty good.
They did look pretty
Actually,
good.
I had pancakes and bacon for breakfast yesterday and the day before in two random, unrelated events, and I've been craving it for literally months. Like, it hit me. I was like, wow, it's been a very long time since I've had pancakes and bacon. And then I did, and then I watched this. Cut this.
I was wondering where you were going.
And then I realized, I mean, it was an interesting coincidence.
I like pancakes.
The people don't really need to know.
I like that you had them in two separate, unrelated breakfast events.
So so Homer finds out that Lisa had made this synthesized calming potion out of the flowers because she's an 8-year-old genius.
Drug calming potion, either way.
Beta blockers.
Yeah.
So,
Serotonin.
so Homer sees the potion and he goes, wait, and he sees the scorpions being calm, and then he looks out the window and he sees Grandpa being all feisty and angry and annoying the shit out of everybody. And he goes, wait a minute, if the potion can make the scorpions calm, maybe it can help my nasty stain. And then he puts it on a stain on his shirt, and he goes, it did clear up the stain. What do we think of that? This obvious joke.
It did nothing for me. I have no opinion on it.
I liked it okay.
I kind of like that again, the means justifying the end. I kind of like that he goes, it did clear up the stain. But it's a case of where you see the joke coming a mile away and they don't really do anything with it. Didn't hate it. You just see it coming, so whatever.
Yeah.
So the next morning after he dosed Grandpa, I guess we don't know it yet, they're all like dreading Grandpa coming in and just being nasty.
Right.
And there's a shot that was maybe one of my favorite visually camera shots that I've seen in the last few weeks that we've covered, at least than I can remember, where it's from a low angle below Homer, Bart, and Lisa, and they're all looking up at the ceiling, and like the camera is kind of like swaying, panning, and you hear the creaking of the ceiling. It was kind of like part monster movie, part like Aliens, where they're trapped in the corridor and like they're coming out of the goddamn walls.
Yeah.
And like it was just a really fun shot to like visually show. That grumpy grandpa has become like this kind of monster that you're dreading. It was, I don't know, it was just a really fun shot. It was very quick.
Yeah, no, that's good. Great point.
And then Grandpa comes down and he turns out he's actually nice.
Yeah.
And Lisa realizes something's up here. Why is Grandpa being nice?
Right, and that's when she realizes that Homer has put her drug in Grandpa's coffee, and she gets really mad about it, and it was really unclear. Lisa's really inconsistent in this episode, because why did she make this drug if not for this reason?
Well, she didn't mean it for humans. She meant it for scorpions, and I guess there's a more of a moral layer.
I guess.
The real question...
I guess I understand, like, human testing. Like, you don't want to just give someone this untested drug.
I feel like she had more of a moral dilemma, like, you shouldn't be chemically making yourself happy, which is surprising for Lisa.
Yes, they did bring that in later.
Because isn't that kind of like is like the Scientologist point of view, and a lot of people, of a stance a lot of people take, where you're not really yourself if you're chemically medicated, because, you know, you're fundamentally changing who you are. And there's this kind of divide that doesn't split like along political left, political right as you would think, where some people are really against. I'm talking antidepressants, not scorpion flowers.
Not the old scorpion flower.
Where people say if you're changing the chemistry of your brain to help your mental illness and be happier, then you're not fundamentally yourself.
Right.
Which is an interesting question, but I think generally the majority takes the side of no, it's totally worth it to take the pills.
Yeah,
I think that's
probably
at least,
beyond the scope of our Simpsons podcast.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying. So it's weird for Lisa to be taking this kind of
Yeah, no, I
outre
agree.
stance. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, it seems like something that Lisa would be into.
yeah, especially because it's her own grandpa.
Right.
And then she's like, no, grandpa can't be happy, but falsely happy.
That's weird. They actually don't really bring up the human testing aspect, do they? Because that's a much better, like, cleaner way. Like, Lisa would be like, no, you can't.
We
It
don't
has
know
to go
about the
through the
side
proper
effects, yeah.
channels. We don't know about the side effects to even set up what actually does happen with the side effects.
See, I told you so.
Yeah. Instead, it's this terrible thing where, like, no, you should be happy normally. Well, some people are fucking depressed, and they need to take medicine to get off of that, so... That's stupid.
Yeah, this is jumping ahead a little bit.
This makes me like the episode even worse.
And a little bit later, like the second beat of this scene, story point, it becomes clear that Grandpa is aware he's on the drug, which I didn't see coming.
Right.
And he's okay with it. He's like, I want to be happy. And I thought that was a really interesting choice because if he wasn't aware, and the question kind of became, do we have the right to medicate him chemically? Now it's in this weird territory. It's like, well, who are you to say? Yeah, if you're very elderly, you kind of lose your own. What's the phrase?
You're
like a lawyer phrase.
non compos mentis.
I guess. I was thinking more of like where you're in control of your own affairs. But in English. But yeah, basically.
Non compos mentis means you're incapable of like making decisions.
It's. But Grandpa's not quite there yet. But it would have been a lot more of a gray area if it was Homer and Lisa having this moral argument over whether it's okay to drug Grandpa to keep him happy and to basically not to keep him happy, but to keep their lives easier. Yeah. Basically, like this is, if you have like a really sick dog and you basically just keep him tranquilized so he's not barking and keeping you up at night. This weird moral question, like, is it worth it? So.
Right.
It would have been really gray and muddy and ugly if it was Homer versus Lisa. The fact that it was Grandpa versus Lisa, and Grandpa was Grandpa was saying, "No, I'm okay with changing my brain chemistry to be happy."
This is better.
That was way better. I'm really glad they made that choice. So I want to give the writers props where I can.
That was good.
It's very rare.
Of course.
But that's why I wanted to bring up, again, the means justifying the end. So this isn't a joke, though, not in terms of humor, but in terms of storytelling. To get to the end of having Grandpa be the one that's saying, I'm okay with it, rather than somebody speaking on his behalf, which is kind of sending it and it removes you from the moral question. Yeah. When you have Grandpa saying it, he's saying his emotions out loud. He's saying, I like being happy. I've been miserable this whole time, and now I'm happy. That's a character literally saying what he's feeling, which is the worst form of writing. It's It's really dumbed down way of writing to have, by the way, I love you, and I'm really torn because I also love this other person. That's not fun storytelling.
That's like Futurama when the robot devil says, you can't just have your characters say how that they feel. That makes me angry.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I'm the robot devil in this situation.
Of course you are.
So,
where's your goatee?
So assuming that the general rule is you shouldn't have characters say how they feel, is the means justifying the end that you have to have Grandpa saying how he's feel in order for him to be a player in the moral story that's going on here? If that makes sense. I feel like I'm starting to sound like an accentless Werner Herzog here.
I see what you're saying. I feel like since the plot is about Grandpa's feelings specifically, like you have to sort of talk about it. But I didn't really mind it. I thought that generally the whole thing was handled okay. I like that Grandpa was happy with being happy, and I like that the Simpsons seemed like Lisa comes, not to spoil it, but Lisa comes around in the end.
Yeah. So it's just weird that she was against it at all.
I was
reason.
really surprised. Like, she immediately, even before she realized Homer was doing it, she was suspicious. Like, it was a bad thing. Like, wait a sec. And Homer was hiding it. And I was like, why is Homer hiding it? He should have been like, guys, by the way, before Grandpa comes down, Lisa came up with this amazing drug. It's going to make everybody's lives happier. Yeah. I was wondering why he didn't do that.
I don't know. What's the benefit of Homer keeping it a secret?
As much as I like morally complex questions of like whether it's whether altering your brain chemistry is the right thing to do, and it's more interesting storytelling, I think you're right in that the safer, cleaner, easier way for this plot to have been handled was the question being
human testing.
Yeah, should they have tested on you? And that would have tied better into the take on pharmaceutical companies that they kind of half-assed do later in the episode.
Yes, definitely.
There was a weird thing before we move on to the next act. This act ends with Homer drinks coffee and he makes a big smile. I was taking notes. I kind of missed what was going on there.
Well, Homer drinks the same coffee that Grandpa was having, which had the drug in it. And then
he makes a
gets
really cartoonish
happy, I guess.
smile.
Yeah, like a really, really big, like, cartoony grin. And then that's how the
That's
act
what I
is.
thought
It
of it.
was
Isn't that
strange.
kind of
It was bad.
like, wouldn't there be
not
bigger
good.
implications to, especially since later on everybody takes this drug? Wouldn't they have made a bigger deal if Homer
Well-
actually ingested this thing, even though it was a one-time?
You're right. Yeah, I didn't think about that. You're right. And it's weird. It's funny that you say that everyone ingested this drug because it turned out it was only the seniors that ever took
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
which I didn't notice until the end of the episode when they brought in that like
They never
generation
they
thing.
never say.
They never called attention to
I'm
it.
treating it like it's an antidepressant when I'm talking about chemical altering because that's basically what it was. Well, it was kind of an antidepressant, really.
It was like
But-
Gleeman-X from the Kids in the Hall brain candy.
But you're right. They only applied it to grumpy seniors, not to people, to aggressive people in general. Like you think they'd give it to Moe and Snake.
right. Yeah.
That actually would have been a lot funnier to see. Like, what would our more aggressive, angrier Simpsons characters be like if they calmed down? So yeah, you have Burns in
Yeah.
there, but you don't really need to see old Jewish man and cat lady. But it would be funnier to see. Yeah. So what is Snake like when you take all his aggression out? What is Moe like? What is Chalmers? How does Chalmers treat Skinner?
Yeah.
Maybe that would have been a more fun, round Springfield take on this.
Would have been a much better episode, probably. Instead, what we get is Werner Herzog and a bunch of crazy stuff about pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
So there's a scene where right after Lisa's still mad that they took the thing, the grandpa took the drug, and Homer's like, "It's fun, we're having." And there's like a joke. Homer's gonna give him a belly piercing or something.
Yeah, he said he was gonna go take him and get his belly button pierced.
Yeah.
And then Grandpa says, "I can hang my purple heart from it."
Yeah, and that was dumb.
Yeah.
But then there's just the fun, like if you would just take that image on its own, it's just Homer and Grandpa belly dancing and Lisa looking really sad in the middle of it. Like that's fine.
These are my suitcase Susies who will use their beauty and free giveaways to make sure our drug is prescribed.
Cool. Are they robots?
No, robots can develop human feelings. We're graduates of Arizona State.
Yeah, so then, so Grandpa's feeling happy, and Homer takes him to Moe's, and I forget what the exact setup was, but Homer, or Moe rather, calls it this grim dungeon full of losers, which I really liked as a great description of Moe's.
Yeah, he didn't want Grandpa to be happying up the place, basically.
Right. That was it. Yeah. So, so Homer or Moe asks Homer if he can do something about it, and then Lenny is like, this doesn't feel like a dungeon. We can leave anytime we want. And he lifts up his hand, and he's chained to the bar, and I was just like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, it's a sort of funny idea, but not really. Like, what's the actual reality
Yeah,
of that
you're
joke?
sacrificing pretty much all reality, grounded in realityness.
To say that Moe is keeping everyone prisoner in his bar.
To have this visual gag of misdirection where then he says, "That's not a dungeon," and then it's tied. Yeah, that's the kind of shit that they do a lot more now than they did before that I really don't like.
Yeah, same.
Whereas like in Family Guy, I could see them pulling that off. Maybe.
Yeah, but Family Guy had the cutaways baked into the show like since the
Well,
beginning.
I'm not talking about cutaways. I'm talking about these where they don't need. They don't need to justify why Lenny is actually shackled to the bar.
Right. Well, Family Guy was never a realistic show, whereas The Simpsons, at least for the first 10 seasons, before the jockey yells, I say, was this very grounded show about real people who just happen to be cartoons. And now, this episode specifically, this is a fucking cartoon. Like, this episode is insane. There are people's eyeballs hanging out, dozens and dozens of them by the end of this episode, and it's crazy. But before we get there, let's get to the big guest star of this episode. He finally makes his appearance in this act. It's Werner Herzog.
Yeah, so Werner Herzog is a German filmmaker. He
is.
directed some big movies in the...
Maguire, Wrath of God, Fitzcarraldo,
80s, 90s.
he did a Dracula.
Lately, he's been doing really cool documentaries.
Yes.
He did Grizzly Man.
Grizzly Man was good.
He did one about Antarctica.
I haven't seen that yet, and I heard really good things.
I really like that one. He did one where he and a very small film crew were allowed in the ancient caves in France.
Yeah,
where there's
Cave of Forgotten Dreams.
Yeah, there was like
Haven't
the
seen that
oldest known man-made art, and they got to film it.
He also made Bad Lieutenant Port of Call in New Orleans with
Yeah.
Nick Cage,
So
which
he's-
is a crazy movie.
So if you don't know this guy,
You should see that movie.
He's very idiosyncratic. Would that be the word for it? Very eccentric.
Well, he's very...
I listened to an interview. I don't think we said this on air. I think I was talking to you off air.
Okay.
But I told you this a few weeks ago. I just listened to an old interview with him on Fresh Air with Terry Gross, and she was like, "There's a rumor that on set of the movie In the Jungle, you threatened to shoot your actor in the head with a gun if he left the set early. Would you really have done that though if he didn't leave? Like you were just being like, you were being hyperbolic, right? You would really shoot him." And there's just like this weird silence, and you just hear Werner go like, no, I'd shoot him. And, like, he's dead. You believe him. He's dead serious. He's just a weird guy.
He's a weird guy. He's very talented. He's a great filmmaker. And he's very... all of his movies are kind of about how how nature will crush us all, and life is ultimately like pointless, kind of. So go see Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, New Orleans.
Did you ever see that interview clip of him on YouTube where he just gets shot in the middle of giving an interview with like an air gun or whatever? But he's just giving an interview and he gets shot, and then they're like, "Somebody just shot you," and he's like, "Yes, it's fine."
Wait, what's the context?
Awesome.
Why is he getting shot in the middle of an interview?
I don't know. Listen, just look at it, guys. I'm not here to.
All right, we're gonna.
So
pause the podcast. We're gonna watch that. Wow, what a crazy clip!
And maybe this will be the deleted scenes, but maybe we'll keep it in because if you don't know who Werner Herzog is, I think knowing this background really does help you realize why he was chosen for this character and how he's pretty much playing himself as a pharmaceutical guy. For the most part.
And I like he comes out, I have no idea what his name was, but it was like Hassan Pfeffer, and I'm the head of the pharmaceutical company, and I like that Carl goes, I was wondering when that guy was going to say something and state his occupation.
Breaking the fourth wall a little bit.
But I liked it. It was in a funny way.
In general, we might as well get out of the way. I think he was a great guest star.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he all the things I really liked in this episode were all his lines.
Yeah, and it helps that they were written funny, but his deliveries also were spot on, and he really knew how to deliver each line the right way. He's very for as dark as movies he makes, he seems to have a very good sense of humor and sense of timing and. I would love to see him on again if he hasn't been on again. I was actually thinking that, not even just this character, but I wouldn't mind him being a recurring character on The Simpsons, or if not The Simpsons, I feel like he would fit in some animated series somewhere. Like
I could see some Adult Swim show where like Werner Herzog was a voice
where he was like a main character. I was thinking like there was a show like 10, 12 years ago. Starring the producer Robert Evans.
Kid Notorious.
And Slash was his sidekick, and it was actually Slash. I don't remember watching that show or it being particularly well received, but I could see a show like that where like Werner Herzog is playing like the sidekick character or the grandpa, and it would work. He just has a voice and a personality for animated television, I think.
He does, and they do. Since we're already talking about Werner Herzog, I want to talk about this. He runs through the whole episode. They do a really weird thing with Werner Herzog's character in this episode, where he's like the head of this pharmaceutical company, and the Simpsons go to the factory, which we'll talk about in a moment. But he drives him back home, and Homer says, "Thank you, Willy Wonka," and Werner Herzog is like, "I am not Willy Wonka. I am Augustus Gloop." And it seems like throughout the rest of the episode, he literally is supposed to be the character Augustus Gloop. From
It
Willy
wasn't
Wonka.
just like a one-off line.
Yeah, no, they keep going back to
legitimate
it.
backstory.
It was great, and he was a German character, and just the idea of just hearing Werner Herzog go Willy Wonka and Augustus Gloop, that was funny. The fact that they kept coming back to it, I really liked it.
And I think it's rare for the show, if ever, to give a backstory to a character where there turns out that they're actually a character from another piece of fiction.
Yeah.
Or even historically, usually you don't have a character turn out to be somebody else, but especially like it's weird for them to have a piece of fiction that they're not really related to in any way. It was very fun.
It was weird, but it was
to do.
So weird but funny.
At some point, so Grandpa doesn't trust him, and he goes, "Where were you during World War II?" Hinting that if he's German, he must have been a Nazi. And Werner Herzog says, "Well, I wasn't born yet." The joke being, Grandpa says, all you Germans say that these days, and that you can't accuse people of being Nazis anymore because it's been so long. What I thought was very interesting about that is, yes, it makes sense. If Werner Herzog is playing a 50-something-year-old, he'd still be born after World War II. Yeah. But Grandpa has always been a World War II vet since the early 90s. His backstory was he was in World War II. Mm-hmm. And because the show doesn't age but does progress through time, at some point they met Adam West in the 1993 Car Expo. And then recently they did a 2009 or 2010 something. So that the years do change even though they don't age. So at what point are we going to be like, Grandpa's too old to be in World War II? Or
Grandpa's 95 at least.
Like Skinner is a Vietnam vet. It kind of works because Skinner's always been a little bit older. He has gray hair. But so if Grandpa was 20 in 1945...
Yeah, he'd be 95.
He'd be 95, and he's, I don't know...
95 is not that much of a stretch, but if the show goes on another 10 years and Grandpa's 105 years old...
We watched an episode a couple of weeks ago where Homer or Marge said they were 36... which was surprising because I always thought it was 38, and I know they bounced back and forth. But even if they're 38, that would mean that Grandpa had Homer when he was 60, and it raises all these interesting questions. And look, you can't really play this game with the show because because what it is, what it is.
It's
and it's a cartoon
show.
But it's funny. It's funny that if you're going to bring in historical events, now it's getting a little weird, especially when you're like if you have one consistent reality, okay, but it's funny to think that Grandpa is still always going to be a World War II vet, but technically Homer and Marge met in the 70s. They also met in the 90s.
And in the 90s. They'll probably meet again in the late 2000s.
I don't think the show's going to be going on too much longer. I said I wouldn't be surprised if there's a season 40, but it's safe to say that 20 years is probably pushing it. But at some point, there could be a point where Grandpa's just way too old to have been in World War II.
I'm 125 years old.
Yeah, or Skinner be way too old to be. Just something I thought that was interesting. By bringing up the fact that this old character was too young for World War II, this older gentleman, it just kind of highlighted the stuff you're not really supposed to think about. Pull the curtain back a little bit.
Pulling back that curtain. So like I said, the Simpsons go to the pharmaceutical factory, and they had a child-proof door. I want to talk about this. What did you guys think of it? Harry, what did you think of that?
I guess the joke was that Homer couldn't open it, and then Bart could easily push and turn at the same time. I don't know. It was dumb, but it was whatever.
What did you think?
Low hanging fruit, just easy.
It was just lame, and I thought like that could work as like a background gag. Like maybe there's like an actual entrance and then the childproof entrance, and they just walk by it and you just see it real quick in the background. Like instead it was 15 seconds of Homer trying to open it and then Bart just opening it. It was just like
I get it, like the bottles. Like having that. Shanghai.
I didn't like it. Jack didn't like it.
I didn't. Guys, don't try and say I liked it.
Harry was like, I love this childproof door.
I was like, isn't this great? This is
he had his fingers he's had his fingers crossed the entire podcast. He clearly loved this episode. So obviously we've been talking about how this episode's just all over the place thematically and story-wise. I really kind of wish. So at one point we see like the pharmaceutical company and like the line of reps. There are all these beautiful women with the classic wheel case, the briefcase on wheels, and they're all on the airplane. And I was really hoping that this was going to become a broad satire on the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah,
because
they didn't
that is
do really
such
much
a
with it.
huge industry. It's such a important industry to society. It's like such a huge part of the fabric of our lives.
That's right.
Like cotton.
Much like pickles.
Now I probably have to leave that awful cotton thing in, otherwise I'm just going to sound like such a douchebag. I was referencing a cotton thing I probably cut. So, anyway.
Stay tuned for the deleted scenes, which will be 17 hours long.
Of amazing cotton commentary. Maybe we should do a shared universe. Maybe we should do a whole cotton spin-off on Harry's podcast.
Don't push that shit.
We're never gonna stop. I feel like I'm in hell, and we're never not going to be recording this podcast. It's hot. We're not even through Act 2.
Anyway, like a pharmaceutical is one of those huge institutions that is like a huge part of modern society and vital society. The type of things that the Simpsons usually did handle, like religion and government and stuff like that.
They would take a satirical look.
Advertising industry. So stuff. Bart's one-liners. Interesting things like that. And that's something the Simpsons does very well. It's something in 600 episodes I love when they haven't done before. Something easy and obvious that they haven't done before is like that's the Simpsons episode I want to see in season 25, season 26. Anyway, so I was really hoping they would do this broad pharmaceutical thing, and they started doing it here and there. They have Bart play a pharmaceutical rep, and they have this long visual gag of all the women who are less human than robots. But I really was hoping they would have done more with it. I would have loved to have seen a Simpsons-fied take on the pharmaceutical industry in the way like they did DC when Lisa had the essay contest.
I immediately thought comics when you said DC.
When they did Washington D.C.
Well, they did. I mean, they did do a pharmaceutical-ish episode when Bart was on Focus It.
Oh, right.
That was there were some.
And that was
satire
when the pharmaceutical company was in the late '90s, when it was really starting to like become this major force in American society and politics. I would want to see it now, where it's fully evolved into this huge titan that is up there that just secretly working behind the curtain, secretly pulling everybody's strings.
So the Illuminati.
Yeah, exactly.
You think the pharmaceutical industry is the Illuminati?
They're
I understand.
They're one of them.
Well, this episode is laden with Illuminati signals. Can you find them all? Write in and get a wee point.
The Simpsons also does really great college gags, like at a lesser college's expense. quote unquote lesser colleges, and they make a joke how all the pharmaceutical reps are from Arizona State.
Yeah.
I just love
Took him down.
Which
specific jokes like that.
I believe it's the #1 party school in America, or it was at some point.
Nice.
So there you go.
So there's a movie, a romantic comedy that came out a few years ago with Jake Gyllenhaal and Anne Hathaway.
Love and Other Drugs.
Love and Other Drugs, and it takes place in the 90s, and it's about the pharmaceutical rep right before and during the Viagra revolution, which I guess the book was. I don't really know that much about the history of the pharmaceutical industry.
That's apparent, Jack.
So I actually really like this romantic comedy because it gave me an insight into the industry that I really haven't gotten from anywhere else.
Yeah.
Basically how they go to doctor, give them the pens, and really push their drug on them, and how there's more salesmanship and advertising going on than you would like to think. with
there's
something
tons. Yeah.
as
Didn't
important
John
as
Oliver
your
do a
medicine.
thing on this? I think he did.
He did.
Yeah.
I was hoping for The Simpsons to do something like that, and it's funny that this kind of mediocre romantic comedy I actually appreciated because it gave me some really good insight into the movie, and it helped me gave me context for like when Bart was going around with the pills.
Yeah. So you were hoping for some biting satire in this episode, and instead you got a bunch of old people with their eyes popping out of their heads.
That was one route it could have been, and rather than doing Web of Spider-Man, where they're doing a little bit of pharmaceutical satire,
they bring in
here,
Venom and Sandman and another guy.
A little moral, complex questions here about the nature of brain chemistry. I don't know what they were trying to do with the human now. So, like, I thought Werner Herzog, they were setting him up to be the bad guy, the evil corporate. Oh, but he's like, no, we don't want to test these. We don't want to put this out until it's being tested on humans.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bart steals them to sell and make some money.
Bart steals him. He basically becomes a drug dealer, but he dresses like one of the
reps,
one of the pharmaceutical reps.
And
He's
he
got
has
a little
his briefcase,
little snazzy suit, which we've never seen Bart in that little suit before. That was kind of nice.
And he goes and he starts whispering into the ears of people who are dealing with grumpy old people. And again, this is where I thought, based on my pharmaceutical knowledge from the Jake Gyllenhaal Anne Hathaway movie, I thought we were going to see Bart playing like a satire of the rep, where he's like, he gives him the pens and he sweet talks him, or he takes him out to a nice steak dinner and says, use these pills. But no, he just whispers in the ears, hey, this will make your old person less cranky, take these pills.
I guess it's satirical in the sense that they're making the connection between pharmaceutical reps and actual drug dealers, which they do literally later when Otto is talking to his drug dealer and like, how come you don't dress like that or act like that? And he's like, because I take my drugs that I sell. That was stupid. I don't like any of that.
On the nose. Lisa, so now Lisa's on board with it. Like we said, she was, for whatever reason, she was against Grandpa being happy.
Yeah.
And then she goes, Grandpa, I'm sorry. It was wrong for me. You have every right to be happy, which I like. And like we said, we think she should have had that
from the beginning.
From the beginning. What I didn't like was, if you're going to do it that way, where she didn't like it and now she does, can we see her make this decision? I think this is like the third or fourth week in a row I brought this up.
I think it is good.
Yeah, but you need to see why the character decided. Like, Marge kicked Homer out last week, or 2 weeks last week. Marge kicks Homer out, and then she just takes him back, and we never get to see her see a scene or some reason that makes her want to do that. And again, there should have been a moment where Lisa goes, you know what, it is worth Grandpa altering his brain chemistry because he's better. He's still the Grandpa I know and love. He's just less grumpy now. Yeah, some kind of if you're doing an arc, an arc is literally like a curve. It's not just 2 points that are in different.
Gotta show your work. How did you get from point A to point B? Exactly. What happened? Why is Lisa changing her mind? What is this? Show your work.
So why, even though we didn't want Lisa to have that original viewpoint anyway, and even though this was like 10% of the story, maybe it should have been the whole story, or maybe it should have been any of the story, but it was just one weird web coming out of this web, like one thread coming out of the web of Spider-Man.
That's what Spider-Man's
all that aside,
whip.
If you're gonna do it, show your work. Let's see why Lisa is.
That's right.
Change her mind. That's all. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, buddy.
So Grandpa's eyes pop out of his head. That's the point where I just said, this is a different show. I don't know what this show is anymore.
Yeah. No.
Like, I realized 4 seasons after this is when The Simpsons go into outer space, and it actually happens.
I mean, they are still connected by optic nerves, so it's not too ridiculous. It's
pretty ridiculous.
In his head.
Yeah, there's just dark holes where his eyes were, as there's hanging retinas.
So everybody's eyes start popping out of their head.
It was really disturbing when that.
It was very disturbing.
I kind of liked it. I kind of visually thought it was like Simpsons. If you're gonna have characters whose eyes pop out of their head, Simpsons characters are the ones to do it. They have those big bulbous eyes. It was kind of fun to see them hanging there and this soft gooiness and like there's cats scratching at them.
You're right in theory, but that could be a Halloween episode where something happens where eyes pop out.
It totally should have been a Halloween episode.
It was just gross. This was really I don't get grossed out that
Jasper
easily.
gets his eye caught in the mailbox. And
yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like it.
The cats are batting at the cat lady's eyes.
Maybe I have some weird tendency towards like liking soft gelatinous things because again the last time we
Is this like when you said you wanted to eat bugs on a
that's exactly what I'm
podcast?
bringing up. The last time we brought up Werner Herzog in this podcast was I mentioned that I would like to eat a bowl of maggots because they just kind of look chewy and yummy like gummy bears.
Do you think it comes from The Lion King when you would see
The grubs?
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it all stems from that moment.
those did look pretty good.
We're gonna get you some bugs.
So like one part of me was like, oh, that's I was cringing when the eyeballs got caught in the mailbox and stuff. But it was kind of just like, I don't know, maybe I like stress balls. Like I was just like,
my God.
I don't know. I thought it was a fun visual. I was having fun with the eyeball gags.
Yeah, I mean,
my brain, like the human part of my brain was like, this is stupid and terrible. But like the lizard part of my brain was like, yeah, fun soft stuff.
I like seeing them hang.
Also, there was a great line where Bart goes, actually, I sold these drugs to everybody across town for money, and ironically, I used the money on these eyeball glasses.
Right, and there are those glasses that have the eyeballs on the springs that pop out.
Yeah.
So that was funny.
That's such
I like
a
that.
fun gag, yeah.
But it's just the eyeballs thing. Like, obviously, I think it was a good thing that there was a side effect to this thing. I think that's what we all kind of expected would happen. I have a question for you guys. Why did they pick a side effect that was so cartoonishly wacky? Like, they could have easily made it something else. Like,
You would think they would emotionally tie it in emotionally to the story, where like all that pent up. Maybe this is the Stephen King, but maybe all that pent up placidity like erupts. All of a sudden, you just have like violent bouts of crankiness or tempers because you've been holding it in.
Then you could have like all the old people of Springfield like rioting through the street and just like fighting each other. That would have been funny.
Or they go through withdrawal, so maybe you make it a connection to the drugs and the idea of the pharmaceutical company as drug addicts, and you have them all like waiting on lines like on the corner, to get their hit. Something like that. Though, as fun as much as I'm defending the eyeball gags, you're right. It really
nothing to do with
served
anything.
no purpose at all.
It was just it's a thing we can do.
Yeah, you're right. It should
it's a
have some
cartoon.
connection.
I think that they wanted something, and I don't know why, because this didn't go anywhere, but I think they wanted something where everyone would still want to take the drug, but, like, they would obviously, like, have ghastly consequences, so, like, that works, but, like,
I guess,
in the end, it doesn't... Do they keep taking the drug in the end of the show? Like, it doesn't... Nothing resolves with that.
The very next episode, everyone starts with their eyes hanging out of their head.
And they do cope with their eyes hanging out.
Yeah.
And there's some, like, so Grandpa wears goggles with the water, and the eyes just kind of float there, and they're, like, googly eyes. I like that. I was hoping, if you're going to do this ridiculous story, that they should have had more fun with it and have more visual gags. So they show the crowd coming up with different ad hoc ways to keep their eyeballs in.
Yeah.
But they weren't any really good ones. Like Gladys had a fishbowl over her head with the but that's pretty much the same gag as the goggles. Mm-hmm. And then there was a guy with a blue Spider-Man mask clinging to his face to hold the eyes in.
Like, the eyes aren't, like, popping out, like, on a spring.
Also,
They're
why
hanging.
is the Spider-Man blue? You're our resident Spider-Man expert. Was there ever a blue costume? I know there's a black
I
costume.
don't think there was ever a blue costume.
Spider-Man blue?
No, Spider-Man red, Spider-Man blue, Spider-Man red. Yeah, I'm not a blue, like, face mask costume. Obviously, his normal
why
costume
did they make it blue? Were they doing this
I guess
weird,
it was trying to be like, we're not it's
but
not
they've
Spider-Man.
had red
it's
Spider-Mans before. They've even had a guy say he was Spider-Man and a guy say he was Dr. Octopus.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it's weird that they pick and choose when they want to avoid copyright issues and when they're totally fine with it.
Maybe it was just when it was colored. Someone just didn't color it the right way. Who knows?
Yeah, so I just wish, besides the blue Spider-Man mask, I just wish that they had come up with more fun background gags for how people were keeping their eyes in.
Yeah.
I did like the signs. Did you see the signs they were holding when the
No.
happy mob came up? One of them was, "These things happen," and one of them was, "I'm just happy to be part of something."
Because
that's good.
old.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that these things happen.
Yeah, I totally missed those. There were a couple of good Werner Herzog lines that I just wanted to run through. I like that they're not going to do anything to help the seniors, the pharmaceutical company, because they're saying it's Bart's fault. But I think it was Homer or Marge who says, "But what about what you say on your Frisbee?" And on the Frisbee it said, like, "We're here for you," for whatever pharmaceutical company was. And he just goes, "As always, the Frisbee is the mirror to the soul."
Yeah, that's like a classic
That was
Herzog
great.
like type line. And that's
Yeah,
why
I
it's
loved it.
funny. There was one right after that was really good too.
The one right after that, he takes out a gun and he puts it to his head. And he says,
there's a mob outside, sir, and he puts the gun to his head.
yeah, right. And he says, "Are they angry? Are they happy?" "Ah, they're pretty happy." And he puts it down and he says, "I'd like to have one day where I do not have to put a gun to my head."
Again,
that was a fantastic
that
line.
Could
I love
be
that.
actual Herzog dialogue.
Yeah, right. He just said that in the studio probably, and they just
they
animated
wrote
it.
around it. Yeah.
I thought that was really great. Then after that, it's just this episode goes on this weird tangent where Homer is like, leaving the pharmaceutical place, he's like, I'm gonna go to Moe's, and he takes the car, and he like runs over the spikes, and it gets flat tires, and then like he and Lenny and Carl set the car on fire
Yeah,
because
they
they're
can't
like,
change the tire.
we don't have to worry about it. We're of this generation, and like that's the old generation. They're gonna take care of it. It's just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I didn't understand any of this.
We already have is this episode about whether it's right to use chemicals to make yourself mentally better. Or is this episode about the pharmaceutical industry? Now it's this weird generational...
Like blaming generations? And also, what generations are we talking about? Because like you said before, Grandpa is possibly 95 years old because he's from World War II. That's a different generation than like someone in the 50s, 60s. And are Homer and Marge supposed to have been born in the 70s, 80s now? It's like...
Well, again,
what are they trying to say?
The high estimate is 38, the low estimate is 36. So we're getting on to where, first of all, where me and you are getting close.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this point, the Simpsons were born in the late 70s, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, when they met. But I just don't understand, like, it's just a real left turn swerve at the end of the episode.
At first we thought it was just one of those classic, post-classic gags that are just going on too long, and then it's like, wait, it's not,
like a couple
it's
of
not
beats,
returning
like,
back to the story, and then
no.
then I'm thinking, okay, maybe the story wrapped up and I didn't realize it, and they're just doing one of these extended, long, weird scenes to end the show with, like this is the button. And then but it wasn't. It turned in that they were introducing this whole new story element of this. It was really just this is what I was talking about when I said before, where you think it's over and then it keeps going. It's like now in my head I'm already I'm already just done with the episode.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, Homer crashes the car, like destroys it, whatever, and then all the old people. They're rallying. They're like, this generation is our fault, and then they rally and fix Homer's car.
Yeah.
And like that was the end of the episode.
What did that have to do with the?
I have no idea what that had to do with anything.
I don't know if that means they decided to not take the drug because they wanted to be cranky and do things,
I don't know.
if...
The episode ends shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I was really confused, and sometimes I'm taking notes and I miss a few important lines of exposition.
If all three of us missed it.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was just
was really
whatever.
unsure of like what was the arc of the
Covenant
the medicine. Like, so does it end with them still taking it and just living with their eyes?
It's not resolved at all. That's the barest bit of plot, and it just completely left in the air.
They seem to be like, look, we don't mind our eyes hanging out of our head. We're happy, and I'm totally behind that. That makes sense.
Sort of. I can understand living with a side effect of a drug if it, on the whole, makes you better. Hey, eyes hanging out of the head, maybe not, but
it's okay because they all
disagree.
Found solutions like Spider-Man masks and fish bowls to keep their eyes in. Also, they probably don't see very well anyway. They're all old.
They are old.
Macular degeneration and whatnot. So it's just...
You and your fancy words. I call it losing your eyes.
It was really off-putting. Like I have like a kind of OCD where I like things to wrap up into a neat little package. And
it's called storytelling. It's not OCD. It's you set something up, it escalates. It's supposed to finish. And
it really bothers me. It's bothering me that I'm not sure exactly where this episode ended.
Yeah.
Like, what was the
What was the point of this episode? There is no point.
Like what Harry said, it's like, were them fixing the car? Did that have something to do with the confidence they got from the?
It must
happy?
be like, I think what it must have meant was, they realized that the generation below them was really easygoing and didn't care about anything. That's why when the car, they're like, we'll just buy a new car. We're dumb, whatever, Gen Xers or something?
Whatever they are.
And then they're like, we don't want to be like that, so I guess we'll be grumpy again. And
so
we'll
they
use
stop taking the pills so that they can actually get things done?
I think so.
Yeah, so again, this could have all been solved if they had picked a story element and just ran with that and focused the laser beam on that. So if it was about the pharmaceutical company, then you come up with an end that fits that.
Yeah.
Or like we said, if the side effect was, if the story was, should we test on humans, and Bart skips it and just goes right to the public with it, which is a very relatable thing you could tie into the real world. And then the side effects are something that actually has to do, that is a storytelling opposite, or it ties in somehow to the drug itself rather than a random eyeball popping thing.
Yeah.
So like I said, so maybe they all become really violent and aggressive, where they go through withdrawal. Now the city falls apart. You have your classic Springfield mob scene, and now you have them say, you know what? we're old. We have every right to be grumpy. We don't need them. Like that's our God-given right. Like to we've lived through
Much better
We've
ending.
lived 60 years of just being okay with shit. Now we're gonna complain about everything we can, which ties into pretty much how Grandpa's always been. Like one of the first times we see him, he's typing up the letter. Like you in the soda
three
commercial.
words I wouldn't like used on
exactly.
TV.
So that just like by making some smart, to me, obvious choices early on in the storytelling, it would have really fixed all. It's kind of like it's like a tsunami where like you make this little ripple of a bad storytelling choice, and it just grows and grows and grows until it's on the other side of the Pacific,
episode.
and it just like destroys the shoreline of the
the very barest of plot for this, like through this episode, like any kind of arc would have made it so much better. Instead, it's a mess.
Instead, it had the barest of like 4 or 5 plots.
Yeah, it was a mess. It was a Lisa plot where she finds a drug, but it's also a Bart plot where he's a drug dealer, and it's a Homer plot where he's drugging his father, and Grandpa's taking a drug. Drug.
Web of Spider-Man.
So I guess the lesson here is...
If you go on a field trip, don't break off from the group.
And if you are a fat little boy in a chocolate factory, never try to drink from the river. The tube. My God, every night I see the tube.
I like the way they ended it with more Augustus Gloop stuff.
Yes, that was great. The Augustus Gloop stuff was excellent.
They brought it back just enough times, either 2 or 3 times. They didn't overdo it. And, and then the episode ends with the I don't know what the word for it is, where everything shrinks to black. Like
a fade to black, or
it's not quite a fade to black. It's where
it comes from the side in a circle.
Porky closes in. Looney Tunes did it all the time. The Departed did it in a few random shots throughout the movie. But where it's everything closes in on one final part of the image.
Oh, right, and it was the eye,
and it's Werner Herzog's eye, and it gets caught on this side of the black, if that makes sense. If you're gonna do weird eye popping humor, that was a great little gag to end.
It was.
And eyes like fell out of the O's and.
And
that
all in the credits,
was a little much.
There were a bunch of eyes falling out. They really liked the eye stuff.
Let's not get carried away.
I'll shut up again for another 20 minutes.
By the way, if you want to hear Harry talk, again, harrysays.yes.com, podcast.com.
Nah, don't worry about it. Let's get this over with.
You're just like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. Okay, so that's it for the Scorpion's Tale. We're gonna rank it on our scale. The
Hippo scale.
The Hippo scale, humor, integrity, production, originality. I'm not gonna go into detail. We want to finish this episode. It's 17 hours long. So here we go. We're gonna put some time on the clock. And we're going to talk about it. Humor of this episode. What do you got, fellas? Harry, what do you think? 0 to 5 scale.
I'm going to give it, I feel like I didn't hate it as much as you guys did. Maybe it's just I'm so happy to see nice people. I'm going to give it like a 2.5. Not terrible.
Down the middle.
Yeah, I laughed.
Totally average. Jack, what do you got?
1.5?
I'm also going to say 1.5. We're in sync
today, Jack. I was thinking
Jack.
a lot lower, but you say 2.5. I was like, oh, maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I just can't think of any jokes I actually really liked.
It's Werner Herzog is a full point.
Oh yeah, I did like the loop. Oh yeah, okay.
And then there were a couple of other bits.
I'll give Herzog the 0.5, so I'll say 1.5.
I wasn't bored.
Yeah, I was a little bit bored, but anyway, integrity of the episode. What do we got? 0 to 5. Harry.
I guess like 1.5. Nobody really was doing what they. Like, Lisa was a scientist sometimes, and sometimes she really hated.
Yeah, Lisa was definitely
happiness.
Way out of character this episode.
It was Lisa being fundamentally against the chemical thing, with at least justified. I could see her taking that stance on an intellectual level if she had some kind of foundation, but we never got any kind of foundation for that, and we never got to see why she changed her mind. They didn't show their work.
Nope, not at all.
So, yeah, I agree. 1.5.
Yeah, 1.5 for me too. Production of this episode, what are we thinking, Harry? What do you got?
I loved the desert stuff. That was really pretty.
Agreed.
I mean, that
eye popping was gross, but
I like squishy things.
Kind of a good-looking gross, I guess.
Had it provoked a reaction in us.
I like the desert stuff. Sure. I like the guy climbing himself. I really like that shot of Grandpa from the ceiling. Creaking over the ceiling. I thought that was a really cool shot. I'm going to give this 3.5.
I'm going to give it a 3, which I think is probably the highest mark I'm going to give this episode. And finally, the originality of the episode. Harry, hit it.
It had a lot of different things in it, so I guess that
sure did.
That took originality.
That's original, I suppose.
And of course, for those who don't know, originality is also where we consider like structural and storytelling structure, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, in that case.
Which is why I think I'm going to give it a very low score. I will give it props for, again, taking on the pharmaceutical companies or doing a satire of that is an original idea that the show could have done. And they did sort of do it for 10 seconds there.
They did, but they kind of completely
Yeah,
wasted it.
and-
So I'm going to dock a lot of points for that. Like what could have been a good episode ultimately being this kind of waste.
Yeah, so I would bump it up to 3.5 for the pharmaceutical, and then I'm going to take away a lot of points for it was just such structurally a mess. It was a 1. I'll give it a 1.
Wow, okay.
I could even give it a 0.5 maybe.
You said 3.5 and anchored in my head, and I know you're taking it away because I'm also a 1. I'm saying this is a 1.
You start at 2.5, you give it points for good, you take points away for bad, and then you have the score of life.
There's the points. Okay, so we have crunched our numbers, and this episode, The Scorpion's Tale, is going to rank as a slightly better episode than The Man Who Came to Be Dinner, and a slightly worse episode than Gump Roast. That puts it pretty low. It's in the bottom 20 for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I do kind of group it in with that Alien episode in that it didn't really feel like it was in the right reality.
Yeah, no, this was a cartoony show that was definitely not The Simpsons. And we forgot to mention who suggested The Scorpion's Tale. It was listener Dan Dennis.
Thank you, Dan.
Frequent listener, frequent friend of the show.
Thanks for the shit.
Thanks for making us watch this terrible, terrible episode. And that does it for this episode of Worst Episode Ever. Check out our website, wepodcast.com. From there, you can do our Amazon and suggested episode on our form. And Woohoo Classic Simpsons Trivia is coming up very soon. It's the first Thursday of every month in Brooklyn in Berry Park. I host that with friend of the show, Dan Ozzie. Lots of other trivia nights in your area, possibly. Just Google Woohoo Classic Simpsons Trivia. Find more out about that. We want to thank Harry for being our guest. Harry Says Yes.
Hey, thanks for having me.
HarrySaysYes.com.
Yeah,
you were a little verbose, which was fine. We'll fix it in editing.
Yeah, just cut all my stuff out. That's fine.
Just ask the scientician.
He'll tell you. Harry, can you come back next week?
You know what? I'd love to. I have a specific episode we should watch.
What do you
It's
got?
The Squirt and the Whale.
From season 21, I believe, right?
Yeah, you know it.
I have the list of episodes right in front of me. Okay, so that's what we're going to watch next week. We're going to watch season 21's The Squirt and the Whale. If you haven't seen it, you can do that on Simpsons World. If you hadn't seen this episode, you can do that on Simpsons World. I forgot to mention that. And we're going to go to one of our listener-submitted Cut All This submissions. If you guys don't know what this is, we're having all of you wonderful listeners submit your own ways to cut all this at the end of our podcast. You can do that on our website as well. So, Jack, who is our Cut All This listener this week? Our cat-submitted listeners.
Actually, it's more than one listener.
Oh.
It's 3 guys.
3 guys, a girl, and a pizza place.
Minus the girl, minus the pizza
All
place.
right, it was also called 2 guys, a girl, and a pizza place.
So take it away, Yakub, Shames, and Yosef.
Hi, this is Shams Bayani.
This is Yakub Bayani.
And this is Yosef Bayani.
And we have a special treat for you. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Popeye's Chicken proudly brings to you the worst episode ever, Tag Team Champions of the World, the Dalek Dan Mahal, the Groofig Jack Pacone, the We Podcast Outlaws.
And if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for ya. Cut all this.